Hi, and welcome back to Epic Restorationz. With our transmission woes finally behind us, today we turn our attention to the steering. There were two different steering gear columns made for the Model A, a 7-tooth and a 2-tooth. The 7-tooth was used primarily in the 1928 and 1929 model year cars, and the 2-tooth was used primarily in the 1930 and 31 model year cars. Ours is a 1930, so we're using a 2-tooth. The 2-tooth is made up of three pieces, including the steering column housing, the gearbox, and the sector housing. Over the course of the past few years, we've acquired about 4 to 5 2-tooth sector steering assemblies. We plan to use the best parts of these to rebuild 1 or 2 really nice ones for our cars. The one we plan to use today is already off the chassis, so today we plan to disassemble the steering column, the gearbox, and the sector housing, take stock of the whole situation, and get them ready for a rebuild. So, let's get to the shop and let's get to work. We began by removing the steering wheel nut from the steering wheel at the top of the column. A 15/16 socket can be used to loosen and remove the nut. We have a steering wheel that we like better, so we'll set this one aside for now. The steering wheel is on a tapered shaft and held in place with a woodruff key, so a steering wheel puller can be helpful to free it up. We previously removed the horn rod from the steering wheel by pressing up on the spring-loaded spider and removing the retaining clip from the end of the column. While we were at it, we removed the two 7/16" bolts and lock washers and removed the light switch bracket and end plate from the end of the gearbox. Next, we removed the column clamp bolt and nut using a 1/2" socket and slid the column off the steering shaft. On the back of the gearbox, we removed the sector end play adjusting screw, lock washer, and jam nut using a 3/4 inch wrench. Then, I began to remove the 4 sector housing nuts and washers using a 5/8 inch wrench. The adjusting cone is located on the upper right-hand side mounting stud.
Now, you should be able to pull the sector right out. Turn the shaft. Or you can turn this.
Not really doing much with that.
You're almost out. Oh, now you can just turn home. Tip it to this 2 teeth.
Oh.
There you go. Yeah, there's your 2 teeth. See? Oh, they just filled it with grease. That's not what it's supposed to be.
That's terrible.
Here, I'll clean this up. We're going to get a new sector and sector housing that has bearings and seals. So we can leave this as is. So this is the eccentric that allows you to adjust that sector, and this cone goes on that one, Almost looks like a clock washer. And this is the nut, right?
Uh-huh.
And that was the nut that tightens it down. And then you just adjust it. You can see how the bottom of this is going to move that around. And then this one, it pivots on this. The whole thing will just kind of wobble back and forth till you get the right setting.
With the sector housing and two-tooth sector removed, we moved on to the steering shaft. To free up the steering shaft end play adjusting bolt, nut, and lock washer must be removed. A 9/16 wrench will loosen it right up. Then, we remove the upper race locking bolt with the 9/16 wrench
So
as well.
Upper race locking bolt.
Broke the washer right off.
Yeah, the washer was broken. So there's time. Next we'll have to take this race out of this worm gear off. Okay, this is an auto. They filled it with grease. This should be a plug. And with the kit, we'll get a new plug. So take that off. Okay, yeah, full of grease. All right, we'll file that.
Next, we needed to remove the upper and lower race from the steering housing. The upper race came right out, but the lower race proved more difficult.
You take a punch through those bolt holes and you can hit the race, and this one hits, but this one is off center and it went past it. So if we get the light on it so you can see, I need another hand. I'll turn it.
Yeah, I can see it. There it is.
Okay, see it coming up and down?
Yep.
It's missing the race. So we're gonna have to drill another hole. We're gonna try it. And we have other boxes if it messes up, but we just come back this far, drill a new hole, and we'll use the punch to get that race out the rest of the way. .77 is what it's supposed to be. 1.177. It's a number 16 drill for tabs. The hole we drilled right here, and see if we can. Yep, the race is moving. I can feel it. My hole's a little tight, but hey, I've moved it. Now we go back to the original hole and push the other side down a little more. Oh yeah, we're moving it.
I can see it through here.
So the race is pulled out. There it is. And if we clean it off, we can see how we were not lined up. Originally with the holes, like they tell you to just punch through those bolt holes. You can see right here, or excuse me, right there, we were just barely hitting it, and see the punch skirted by it. The hole was that far over. So we drilled a new hole, and that's that little spot there to be able to punch it, but it comes out relatively easy. Could cut a notch in it, heat it up.
Next up is the worm gear. Because we're rebuilding the steering box and replacing most of the old parts with new ones, the ring gear and upper and lower races must come off. The worm gear is pressed onto the shaft, and you must be careful to not bend the shaft. To remove it, we're going to use the upper race as sort of a hammer because it fits perfectly around the end of the worm gear. We plan to replace both parts when we rebuild the steering box anyway, so it won't matter if they get a little banged up. Sitting in the hollow of the vise allows the shaft to move freely without strain. Slowly, we'll use the shaft to help us drive the worm gear off the keyway without bending it.
So now, since we got lucky and it's moving a little bit, I want to try to heat it to see, because it's cold here in the barn. See if we can't get this to just a little bit bigger. But there is a keyway, if you can see it there on the end. Threads in the end of this shaft, and we're going to be able to put a bolt so we can take a new worm gear and press it on using the bolt. And this one has a nice keyway on it, and there's a keyway here in the shaft, and we're going to clean this all up nice. But that is what we were using, a 5/8 11 thread NC tap, and we're going to get a 5/8 11 grade 8 bolt, or long bolt, long enough that we can picture the thread would go in this far, and we have this, and we're going to put a nut on that bolt, use the nut to pull this on. Ready? Come on. And not squeeze too hard on that shaft. Earl on it. Just snug it if you can't hardly turn it with your fingers. Now I'm not fighting the wood or the metal chips. Wood chips. Hope I don't find wood chips. There's a little bit of a drag right there. Yep, that's it. All right.
Finally, we remove the control rods and upper bushings. The control rods are held in by the spring-loaded control rod arms. Soft pins attach the arms to the control rod. The pins can easily be sheared. A punch may be used to fully drive the control rods through the control arm. Then, the arm and spring can be removed from the rod. Depending on how stubborn your rods are, a vise may be helpful to hold the end of the rod in place as you pull it out of the bushing. We're going to replace ours, so a hacksaw to the rods did the trick. With our steering completely disassembled, all that's left to do is clean up the parts and put it back together. Join us next time as we rebuild the steering assembly and get it put on the car on the next episode of Epic Restorationz.